All right. Welcome, everyone, to Religion Zero number 44. Uh, yeah, number 44. Joined, of course, by my panel of Brooke. Corey is coming on in just a minute. He's got to take care of some stuff, whatever he's got going on. But how's it going, Brooke?
It's going all right, Amos. It's going all right. You know, things are kind of coming together. As you see, I've been working on my place. My couch is in. I am actually biting the bullet on getting a television. I know, it's all the work of Satan and all this sort of thing. But you can't exactly have ladies over for Netflix and chill if you don't have a TV to Netflix, at least that part of it. So yeah, I'm kind of getting into that whole thing. I've got a TV stand come in. I've got a nice TV, I guess, cupboard or something to put the whole thing on. And probably in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be looking to actually get a television. So if anybody has like some suggestions on like what's a good TV, what works, I'm open to that kind of thing. So yeah, that's going to be pretty interesting. And on some slightly more cultural news, seeing as we got time to kill, I've recently been appointed to the board of trustees to the Trinidad and Tobago Association of the UK, which is a charity out here, focused on, community development, cultural education. So it's a whole massive restructuring. These guys need a lot of input, a lot of direction. So I'm going to be working with their finance crew, marketing, probably doing some social media stuff. And hopefully I'll bring some audience members across to our various shows as I'm involved in that type of activity. So not a bad week. Interested, looking forward. What's going on with you, my friend? How are you doing out there? Is it snowing? Did you just like get through full spring, or is it actually spring this time?
It's actually spring this time. No, it's a cold spring, which I don't like. But it's spring nonetheless.
Nice.
We got some rain yesterday.
Nice.
Which was dumb. Since my job is outdoors, the rain was definitely not fun at all. But yeah, it was so far so good here. It's we're getting our spring where I'm just wanting it to warm up just a little bit more than it has been. But yeah. Anyways, so let's see here. We got Corey.
He did see the message, so I'm sure he will be along shortly.
Yeah. Well, today we're doing things a little bit different. We are we're doing a little Q&A today, letting you guys in the audience, those of you who are in the chat, as well as
Hey,
what's happening, bro?
Well, I had a last second coffee issue, if you know what I mean.
Is that a TVR logo in the background?
No, it's a VR logo.
Oh, a VR.
And it's a placeholder at the moment. It's up with thumbtacks. I got to actually screw it in later.
Okay, cool.
Because I thought the thumbtacks would be enough to actually hold the actual VR on it too, but no, it's too heavy. So I'm gonna have to perma hold it in there. But yeah, there's at least the controllers for it. That works.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, fill us in on your week, CONK. What's been going on with you?
I found a new addicting game to play, and so I'm probably going to do nothing but that for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then get bored and never play it again. It's one of those times of life, so that's good.
It's not Stardew Valley, is it?
Oh no, there's a new Magic RPG. So Magic the card game.
Magic
I'm a
the Gathering.
Nerd. Yeah, but they made it like an MMO Diablo style game for it. It's in the same universe and has a lot of the same mechanics, except you actually go around and shoot and stab people instead of playing cards, right? So everyone hates it right now because the tutorial that teach you how to play is like 6 hours long and it's boring and miserable. But the game, once you get past it, is amazing. It's just so many people can't make the climb, through tutorial Everest. They're weak.
I mean, you had a special guest come by. A friend of the show.
Oh yeah, there was a very how do I put this? There's a very charismatic man that happened to drive by Kansas City on Wednesday. That was fun. His name is Bomb Tomba Bill. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him.
He did a drive-by of Kansas City? What?
Yeah, the whole thing. That's a lot of bullets. Everyone's gone. It's Mad Max over here.
That's crazy. I'm glad you got to meet him, man. That must be quite an experience.
Yeah, just got some coffee and shoot the shit. Good fun. The way the founding fathers intended.
Well, yeah. So back to what I was kind of saying, we're doing things a little different this week. We're doing a Q&A, or ask me anything, as they all say. Done quite a few topics, and a lot of us have definitely, you guys have like tuned into a lot of them. So we wanted to kind of gauge and see like what everyone else is thinking about, what kind of questions they have, to kind of see, you know, we can help people answer in their questions. So obviously we'll be taking questions both in the chat as well as in the show. So you guys think I should just drop the link?
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah, you could drop the link. I mean, I've got a couple people who sent me private questions, so if nobody's jumping on, we can address those first.
Yes. So drop the link in the chat. If we don't get to you right away, we will get to you eventually. I know we don't have quite as many people that we would be overwhelmed per se, but let's actually take one of the private questions, Brooke.
Sure. So I got a question on the Brooke Potter Ministries fan page. Somebody wanted to ask, they asked me a specific question, but the broader question was like, who do we listen to in terms of ministry influence, and maybe some books that people could probably get into. So the guy asked me specifically about Greg Boyd. He's in Minnesota, isn't he, Amos? Greg Boyd?
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard of him.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to be very pivotal in our atonement conversation, because he's definitely a Christus Victor kind of guy. So yeah, for the person who asked the question, yes, I am familiar with Greg Boyd. In terms of other people that I listen to, definitely John Crowder, I think, is probably the most rounded, fantastic theologian, very versed in church history. I used to listen to a guy called Bertie Britz, South African gentleman. Haven't really listened to him much recently, but he's also very solid. And I'd say a guy called Paul White, not Paula White, but Paul White. I think he's in Missouri or one of those places. Yeah, I'll have to double check that. He was a good guy as well. But to be very honest, I have not listened to any kind of ministry anything in a very, very long time. But you know, for those who are into that kind of thing, that's kind of who I could recommend.
Yeah, it's definitely good to like point new people in the direction, but I think there's a time in your life where you figure out how to do it yourself. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah,
it's kind of like home repair, except Bible study. It's kind of you realize, I could just figure it out now. I don't want to have to pay and spend all that time and energy learning somebody else's viewpoint, seeing if it's valid or not. You know,
correct. So,
just do your own work eventually, but it's good to get guidance if you don't know nothing.
Yes. So, I mean, what about you guys? Who are the influences that you guys would recommend or even listen to now?
Jesus.
There's always one, isn't there?
It's always the right answer.
Influences. I mean, people that we all listen to. I remember, big influence would be, I could say this. Would be Curry Blake. So he was a minister that I'd worked with, one of the first ones I worked with back in 2011, 2012-ish. And then I could also kind of afterwards could add on people like Joseph Prince, even who else? Yeah, John Crowder. Like Brooke was saying, also.
John Crowder's the one that has a mug club, right? Is that how that works?
That's a different one.
Oh, okay.
It's a different crowd.
I was like, I didn't know he had a ministry. That's weird. This Bible study is sponsored by guns.
And I think there's a John Crowder who's in a rock band or something as well. It's not a night. This is the one
possibly.
Yeah, it's for one.
Man, he keeps
Uh,
getting kicked off Twitter. It's ridiculous.
I think his ministry it's the New Mystics. I think is his ministry sort of thing. So it's John Crowder of the New Mystics.
yeah. So, boy, it's been a while since I've really thought about a lot of this. I don't know. There was this one guy I know that definitely was a bit of a turning point in my faith. Very not very well known minister. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Brooke Potter.
No, that guy's a heretic. He should be burned at the stake.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sounds lame.
No, yeah. Ever since knowing Brooke and talking to him, I remember definitely a lot of the stuff you talked about, Brooke, kind of influenced a lot of my beliefs too. So
we had a good team. We had a good team of people. Yeah. We had some good times.
That's good.
Let's see here.
What about you, Conk? Who's influencing you? And
I would say it'll sound weird, but John Piper was very foundational for me, like learning to care about Christianity and religion in general. I think 80% of what he teaches is really good, except for he's a Calvinist and I'm very anti-Calvinist. I don't hate you if you're Calvinist, you're just wrong and you need to use your free will to accept that. But yeah, he's a staunch Calvinist and he's halfway there on the gender dynamics. He's willing to talk more about the inequality or the non-blank slate. He's talked a lot about that, which is good. He's on his way, but he's still a little bit blue-pilled in some of the other areas, but he's closer than probably 90% of the American pastors. So so some of his gender stuff's off, his Calvinist stuff off, but like his basic just exegesis of looking at scripture, looking at the Greek and the Hebrew words and finding the root meanings and what's actually happening here in context. Those are all great. So if you're just looking for a random passage Bible study, John Piper's right 8 out of 10 times. That's how I usually put it. But yeah, he was really good. I was really into apologetics when I was younger, so some of the apologetic guys are interesting. William Lane Craig, not necessarily for theology, but he's got some good. Yeah. His apologetics and his philosophy is actually interesting. He also considers himself a nihilist as well, so it's interesting being Christian nihilism. And then my most modern one, I've talked about him a lot here, is Sean McCraney. I like him because he wants you to openly disagree with him. He's trying to find all the differences in religion and talk about what is essential and what is non-essential. So things like Calvinism or like how you do baptism or if you speak in tongues and not. He's very open about like whatever floats your boat, man. I don't do it, but cool. You know what I mean? And that's where that's where the Christianarchy tag came from. Is he invented that because he thought all faith is subjective outside of like, did the gospel save you? Okay, everything else is, whatever you want. As long as you got that essential, then you're pretty much Christian. And I think that's interesting. He's very big on learning about spiritual authority abuse, where people try to whip people into submission and have all these crazy rules. Yeah. Instead of letting people live free and like what they actually are, convicted by the Holy Spirit and not convicted by the pastor browbeating you. So he's got a lot of interesting things about that too. But yeah, so I'd say William Lane Craig and John Piper older. More newer would be Sean McCraney, and he's as wacky as I am, so that's good. He's also a giant guy like me, but his beard's way longer. He's got the beard game down there. So one day I'll get Sean McCraney's beard. One day.
I think a worthy mention for me is somebody I'm actually trying to get on the show is a gentleman named Jeff Turner of Sound of Awakening Ministries. So he's an itinerant minister. We worked with him. He was very influential to me, and probably I don't know. He's just such a charismatic style. There's a lot of his messages on YouTube and other places. He used to run a church, so he, much like us, has a lot of the background information. He walked away from all of that And yeah, he's written a couple books, and I think he's doing his own stuff. But really cool guy. I'm gonna try and get him on the show. It might be an interesting discussion, but I don't think it would be complete if I didn't mention him.
Nice. Blessed.
Nice. We have anybody in the wings, Amos?
I think we got one here. We got one from Betty. Why do triangle sandwiches taste better than square sandwiches?
Oh, I have an answer for that.
Oh, go ahead.
It's nostalgia factor, right?
Like Mama used to make.
Yeah, exactly. And that, like, have you ever seen one of the biggest growing products right now is weighted blankets? And it's the same thing. Weighted blankets are supposed to keep constant pressure on you, like you're being coddled as a baby. And it's a coping mechanism a lot of people use is to feel infantile. So if you're like tucked in or wrapped in blankets or have something heavy on you, or you go back and play your old favorite middle school Pokemon game or anything like that, or listen to your middle school playlist, a lot of people do that as coping mechanisms. And it does have sense of like dopamine and euphoria in it. So that's fun. And people use that as coping, which is not always necessarily a bad word. I know a lot of people use cope as a bad word, but it is what it is.
I mean, to be fair, even in the therapy that I did, one of the exercises was actually to buy some Legos and build, some Lego. That was, kind of taking me back to the childhood and doing all that kind of thing. So yeah. We're all for mental health on this show. So
oh yeah,
whatever helps floats your boat.
That sounds like torture to me. I was born with sausage fingers. I've never been small, and Legos are not for the non-dexterous.
Why do hot dogs come in packages of 8 and buns in packages of 10?
They don't out here, actually. I know this is a very American joke, right?
How do you count hot dogs and buns in metric? How do you do that?
No, like
it's the conversion rate.
It depends. Like the Hebrew National comes in batches of 7, for instance.
That's terrible.
And then I think you could get like a jar of sausages, and I actually don't know how many are in it because I don't really eat processed meat. So, but I know that's a very American joke. Like you get more buns than you have sausages, kind of generally speaking. So
yeah, you gotta buy like 40 of each to even it out, so you don't have any left.
This is a really interesting question. Is it essential to always use lube?
All
right.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess it depends on the activity.
It depends on the activity. Yeah, definitely. Slip and slide. You'll need something.
Like
tobogganing.
Yeah, don't use lube while you're cutting your sandwich diagonal. That'll be really hard. You don't want a slippery knife. That sounds dangerous. But lube can be useful in other activities. Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't hurt.
Any other questions, Brooke, from your private questions?
From the private, yeah, okay. So from the private one other question I got was, what do we think the meaning of life is? Like, why are we here on the earth? And I'm gonna pass that one off to you guys to start. So, CONK, why are we here? What do you think our reason is for coming on into the earth?
Do you want the Christianese answer or the non-Christianese answer?
I give both now. We got the time.
Yeah. Well, for my video game turns, the Christianese answer is we're in New Game Plus, where there isn't necessarily an objective meaning. It's really between you and God and the world of what you want to do. After the Christianity, before Christianity, it's a little bit different. That's a lot more striving. There's a lot more trying to make your dent in the universe, as one of our favorite balded, bearded friends says a lot. There's a lot of that going on, but I feel like in the Christian world, you can strive if you want to, but you don't have to, right? You've already beat the game, so to speak. And we're in New Game Plus from video game terms, in that now you can just play the game for fun, right? There's no longer that stressor that, oh, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to be scared of death. I got to make sure I'm, keeping up with the Joneses. Like, all of that fades away pretty fast. The more you're in the biblical Christian mindset, in my opinion. So why are we here on this earth? To enjoy it. And if you can make some change or do some nice things on the way, cool beans. You don't necessarily have to. The thief on the cross didn't do a lot of charity, but he was there and he got to New Game Plus right at the buzzer. So, you know what I mean? If the thief on the cross was able to go to heaven, that means like all of our works, I guess, to use the fancy term, is really just, condiments at the end of the day. The meat's already done. Does that make sense? Hopefully. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a happy nihilism that it doesn't matter for the best reasons.
Amos, what say you, man? What is the purpose of life?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No,
good answer, by the way. That was Solomon's answer.
It's viable. It's viable.
It is what you make of it. I tend to take the, like, not to get too philosophical on everyone, but it's kind of a combination of like kind of what CONK was saying, but also I know what probably Brooke is going to say too.
Stealing answers? Are you cheating on the test right now, Amos?
Yeah. No, it's kind of like it's what's called kind of the absurdist view. So it's this understanding that like, okay, if you really tried to figure out meaning in your life, you're probably not going to find it. So you kind of have to make your own meaning. You have to define what is meaningful to you. And I think in a way God kind of allows for that, is you find what you want to do. It's not this like, I mean, there's calling, like your calling, but plenty of people have had callings on their lives and have done nothing with it, or kind of go the wrong way with it, and or they just take it too serious. They take it too seriously, I guess, in a way. So they overdo it, underdo it, if there's even such a way to do that. But you have to kind of find your own meaning and define it in your own way. And don't think too hard about it, because that whole view of what is the meaning of life it's such an external thing instead of an internal thing of like, what do you want to do? Like, what's the meaning of life? Okay, you obviously don't. If for someone who's asking that, probably doesn't know what they want to do to begin with. So figure it out on your own. What do you think, Brooke?
Yeah, I would echo what you guys are saying, although I've recently come to an understanding that there might actually be more to this life than we originally thought. And it has to do with God's plan. So for anybody who's interested in the long version, I've said it many times on the show. I have a video on my ministry channel about the purpose of creation. And it is all about God expanding his presence and his knowledge and sharing that experience with humanity. So yes, I think the desires that God has put in your life tend to be, part of your calling or your purpose. I don't think that necessarily affects your salvation, as they say, whatever the case might be. But I also think there's a side that God is looking forward to in our human experience, which is the awakening of the God consciousness within man, where we realize that we are actually in union with him, where we actually begin to enjoy the union with him. So this, in the Orthodox Church, this is called theosis, where, God became man that man might become God. We can, in theory, the theology is there to support the idea that we actually mature into a state of Christhood. Not that we'll ever be God. God is unique. That's like a triune being. We'll never be that. But the scriptures talk about as we behold Christ, we become more like Christ. And there's some really funky mystical experiences in church history that show that, there is the potential for humanity to experience the divine at a pretty crazy level of teleportation, time travel, moving through walls and multiplying food and all sorts of things. Not just things we've seen in the Bible, but been recorded throughout church history. where the God consciousness awakes within humanity and we realize our union like Christ. So yeah, I think I think that's a part of the Christian tradition, and there is a strain of thought, and I don't know how accurate it is, that we will actually keep coming back to Earth until we fulfill that. So there is like this reincarnation idea that you won the game. You're never not gonna I don't particularly believe in a hell, but you're never gonna lose in that sense. But you'll keep coming back to learn the lessons and so forth until you awaken into your God consciousness and we become like Him permanently. So that might mean coming back in the 1800s as a woman. It might you might end up in the year 3000 as as whatever alien life. You'll keep coming back until you've experienced everything, awakened everything, had every experience, and then we are like God. That's big Christian theology, very, very complicated. I think it's cool. It's a lot better than just live, work, die, and that's it.
Right. I like this answer here.
What's that?
What is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of their women.
Yeah, that's if that's the desire, go for it, bro.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it. No.
Yeah, somebody once asked me
it's valid. Yeah.
What's the best way to drink mead? And my first response was from the skull of your enemies. Second that, you can have it neat.
Amen.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we've got Tom.
What's happening, Tom?
What's happening, guys?
Oh, wow.
Where are you, bro?
I'm 30 minutes outside of Denver.
I used to live there. You're just doing a CONK home tour.
How's my audio?
You're coming through good.
Yeah, it's coming through good.
Good to see you, AMOS, sir, Brooke, sir, CONK, sir. I have a question for Brooke. So a new age guy who looked just like the incarnation of Saint Michael, like he had this blonde hair, very Nordic looking, maybe like 5'8" and stocky. He said that I was the reincarnation of Saint Peter. Okay, I don't believe that. I do have Jewish blood. Maybe I'm related to him. If there's reincarnation, like who are the master keys? Like how many master individuals are there? Or are we all shards of God's heart? Like what is it?
The reincarnation theory is actually a very Jewish trope, and we see it in the Bible. When Jesus is like, "Who do men say that I am?" They said you're one of the prophets. You're Elisha that's come back. So they believe that they come back in that sense. In terms of the dynamic, that is an area of study that Christianity has not done a lot of research in, because they think once you die, that's kind of the end of the story. So you kind of have to look a little bit more on the fringes to kind of get some ideas. And the closest orthodox response to that is theosis. We come back to learn the different lessons until all of the pieces come together and we perfectly reflect Christ in our personality and otherwise. So in like how you say, with the shards of God, in a way, yes, that's exactly it. God, in a sense, has gone to sleep in every man. He's sleeping dormant. The mystery of Christ in you is in every man. And the goal of the life is to awaken that Christ consciousness within you to realize your full union. But even though you might experience it fully in one life, there might be another life where there's another side to that, like a different facet to that you have to experience. So the idea is that we can keep coming back until we like completely awaken. That's the closest we have. It's not very well supported. It's a nice theory. I don't know. I think it's cool.
I think it's cool too. I like it a lot. And that's it. I'm just gonna smoke my cigarette. I'll call back later if nobody else calls in.
What I'll do is I'll send you the guy that kind of did the fringe study on this. I'll send you his name and you could look into it if you want to.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Thank you. Yeah, I met. Hey, CONK. What'd you think of our meeting?
It was fun. Mostly.
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 I told CONK that I want, because he said that he was an angry child, and I want the angry CONK to come back.
Yeah.
It's like awakening Hulk, It's like you got to be careful.
It's terrifying. I was quivering. I will be the first to admit I was like we went outside because it's Missouri and the coffee shop closes at 6 p.m. and CONK is standing in front of me like this huge juggernaut, and I'm just there smoking my cigarette, quivering, trying to like tell him that I'm not a liar or whatever you were talking about.
Oh yeah, that was fun. We can get into that later, but yeah.
I'm glad you guys got to meet up, man. That sounds like quite a story.
Oh yeah, it was
Yes,
fun.
sir. Yes, sir.
The coffee's
All
good
right,
too.
I'll call back.
Yeah,
Coffee
we'll
was
talk
good.
to you in a little bit then,
Yeah.
Tom.
Take care, Tom.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty cool.
All right, let's see.
Obviously, we got to have that conversation off the air, like in a raw takes. Like what happened behind the scenes. That sounds very spicy.
Oh yeah, we went to very heavy theology stuff, but
yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, good fun.
Let's see here. Got some funny ones here. Is the skulls of my enemies dishwasher proof?
Just check the label on the bottom. Most skulls come with a sticker on how to properly deal with it. So
as long as it's not made in China, I think you'll be all right.
Yeah, don't get any lead paint in your skull.
Who's that? That's Betty. I know who Betty is. Yeah, she's having a good time. Bad girl. Bad girl.
Red Crusader is saying, is God Azathoth, the sleeping dreamer that will eventually be awakened and destroy the universe? Oh, are we in a dream?
No, that's not it. The person who kind of the Christian mystic that really got into it was William Blake. If anybody wants to read the work of William Blake, so he would talk a lot about that. He had a couple of quote unquote disciples that came later on. So Neville Goddard was one. Abdullah is another one who was a Jewish sage. There are a couple others. But he wrote, his famous work, William Blake, was Jerusalem. He wrote the poem Jerusalem, which is it's a classic book. You could get it on Amazon for like £1 or maybe a couple dollars or whatever. And it's supposedly this entire poem was downloaded from the heavens, and he was basically in a trance, and it was dictated to him. And it talks a lot about how God is asleep in man, awaiting to wake up. And we see it in Ephesians and in the Psalms, awake, O sleeper, come forth and all this kind of stuff. So it is a Christian concept that God is asleep in man. We don't have a lot of theology on it, on like really what it is. So it is kind of these extra biblical sources to this kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting. Why not, man? Who doesn't want to be God?
I mean, yeah, I like the at least not like word for word or exactly, but I do like the view of some of the ideas presented in the story of the egg.
Right. Yeah, I think I know the one you're saying.
Do you know about that one, CONK?
I don't think so. No.
So the egg is a story. You can look it up. Like, there's been a lot of remakes. People will kind of act out their own interpretation of the story, but it basically describes this man who's dead. He wakes up, he's in this place, and he's met by God. So he's starting to talk to God, and eventually starts to figure out, like, okay, so reincarnation is real, but it didn't make any sense. That basically manifests for a short bit and then goes back into the water.
Yeah.
So here we are. Our limited understanding of being a person is like a wave trying to distinguish itself from the water when it's just the water. So there's just constantly waves coming in and out of the water. That's just us, but we're all part of the lake.
I mean, it makes sense. It's all God, right? God is the fabric of all creation. So everything is him. And, he's put us together. Each of our personalities and everything come from him. So he's just taken bits of himself, put it into you, and made Amos and made CONK and made me. But we're all held together by him, and he is kind of our true essence at the end of the day. Now, this is Orthodox theology. This isn't anything radical. But what the implication of that is, like, okay, did he just do that so you get a nice experience in this earth once for a couple years and then die and then just be with him? Or does time really not matter? Death really doesn't matter to him, and we might be doing this a lot of maybe thousands or millions of times. Who knows?
But then the whole thing where, like, we're sort of this creation, like growing up to become like God. Gets a little Mormon-y in there too.
Oh,
Yeah,
Mormons.
the Mormons
Do we get our
might
own
have
planet?
that right. Yeah, they might have that right to some degree. Maybe not like that. They give you a planet. Maybe not, but who knows? Maybe you get your own universe. I have no. There's no way to know. I mean, you're not God. You're not, as I say, not in the Christian sense of a triune being. That is unique. There's nothing comparable to that. But you are like Christ, which is the full expression of God in humanity. And what does that look like? We've only got the scriptures to tell us. We don't know what that looks like in everyday life. Oh, we're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, it looks like it's starting to come back, but yeah, Susan tried to get us.
Wasn't it? Which was Wachiki or whatever? Wiki woman,
Wachowski, something like that.
the Wicked Witch of the West.
Waikiki.
I didn't think we would say anything that controversial. I mean, you know.
Investigate 311.
Nobody waiting in the wings.
Going on here?
What about you guys? I mean, you guys have questions that you want to maybe ask each other, kind of thing.
I have some fun topics, but I think they might be entire show things. So
okay,
I've been holding them in the back of my brain. But I think a really important question is, who's the best Marvel superhero? Who's the best DC superhero?
And then we do villains.
Sure.
How about, did you watch the Snyder Cut?
Oh yeah.
As I keep telling Amos as a side joke, when you start talking about movies in a stream, you basically run out of things to talk about.
Oh yeah.
But a friend of mine recently discovered that Superman is actually a archetype for Jesus Christ, right? You know, the last son of Krypton and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, yeah, you know, the Matrix is the same thing, right? Like Neo in the Matrix is, you know, the same thing, one sacrificing himself for the masses. And yeah, this archetype is seen pretty much all over our culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also the whole hero's journey aspect, right? That you can see in most, practically all male characters, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. I actually had in community college, I had an anthropology class, and we had this whole section. It took up like a third or a half of our semester talking about the hero's journey, and the teacher was awesome. First of all, her name was Cherry and was actually named from a stripper through the stereotype, but she was like in her 60s. She was older, but she was like a hyper nerd. And so half of our papers were about watching movies in class and then having to write a paper about how it applies to the hero's journey. So we watched episode 4 of New Hope in class as like our entire class once. We watched District 9, the Alien movie.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
Yep. And then we just wrote papers about how it applied to the hero's journey. And then for 2 weeks, our homework was to play World of Warcraft, but you have to pay attention to the story and see if you can find it in there. So it was a pretty awesome class. We got to watch movies and play World of Warcraft as homework.
Where were those teachers when I was in school? God damn it! Like,
I mean, yeah, but it was also community college, so like where nobody cares about anything. So you can do whatever the hell you want. But yeah, I purposely took all of my elective classes, like the ones you don't have to. It's just random credits. I always went out of my way to see what she was teaching that semester because I knew I wouldn't have to do a lot, and it was fun, you know. So
that's pretty. I've got a private question that just came in here. I don't know if.
Yes.
Oh, were you going to say something, Amos?
Oh no, I was about to ask you actually for another private question.
Yeah. I just got one. So, what is your worst religious experience? That's just it. So, what is your worst? I guess I don't know. Dealing with the church or what? I don't know.
The
Carl,
worst religious experience.
Yeah. What is like maybe just a negative dealing with people? I'm not exactly sure what that means if the person wants to clarify.
You want to talk about bad trips or what?
I've never had a bad trip to think of it. But I mean maybe some of the the backlash that we faced, we could probably discuss some of that, and maybe sometimes when people, well, for me it was people pulled the microphone on me. I was invited to a place to speak. I went up, I started preaching, and somebody literally turned off the microphone and escorted me off the stage. That was pretty bad. I was on the radio, and a whole bunch of people called the radio station and told them like get me off the air. And one of the biggest churches in my country, same thing. Pastor stood up in the middle of the church, said anybody who's got Brooke Potter on Facebook or any of these places, take him off, and basically denounced me as a heretic and other things. And I think the one that hurt most of all is actually the one that involves Amos and myself being part of a team. The guy who was heading the team up, he kind of threw me under the bus in a pretty public way. There was a lot of incrimination. And that hurt because this was a guy, I lived in his house. I broke bread with him. He washed my feet. We were like brothers. And yeah, he basically threw me to the dogs. And I have to admit that was pretty painful. That was pretty painful. What about you guys?
I'd say that's kind of up there the same. Similarly, there was definitely conversations I remember we would have on certain beliefs. I think it was what do we got here? Had a lot of. I know we had a lot of discussions on different topics, and there was a. I think on my end, it probably would have been too late to kind of bring up some of the issues. I know there was a discussion we had where we and I basically just kind of pointed out how hey, I just said this and you had a problem with it, but then you said the same thing and you told us to not have a problem with it. So
hypocrisy.
Yeah, hypocrisy. And it's not to call these people necessarily hypocrites, but just the how it would go so quickly to where these were people that we like you said broke bread with. I stayed with this guy for a few days. We gamed. I met his family, and hung out with him and everything. And just it got to the point where, it was like, oh, you don't talk to me like I'm someone who spent time hanging out with you and all that. Like the attention, the understanding of someone's heart, stuff like that. Some other ones I'd say are I would say it's kind of one of my first experiences in ministry dealing with people. There was an instance where I basically refused to do something, and I got a call the next day where someone basically told me you do as you're told. And it was for something very minor. I basically it was, hey, someone asked me hey, could you do this for me? And I said, no, I'm busy doing this. Well, I really need you to do this. Well, I'm busy doing this right now. And then the next morning I get a call really early in the morning. Hey, when my wife tells you to do something, you do it. What?
And that wasn't even the leader of the place. It was, yeah.
It was a weird thing, and it wasn't hey, I was bringing something into the house and you moving stuff or anything. It was a very, very small task that really had nothing to do with me. It was just, but it was kind of, and it sounds kind of silly, but it's kind of one of the first major signs to me that was oh, we're not in the same place anymore. The heart's
some are more
right
equal than others. Yeah.
Yeah. Some things aren't really going the right way now. So, yeah. Anyways, the Standing Wanderer says I should consider growing a beard. Well,
yeah, that's the second time it's come up in chat. Yeah.
I would if I could. Brooke and I are in a similar, but Brooke's older than me, but he's also part Asian like myself, and we just don't get full beards until our 30s.
Yeah, it takes time.
You got to really cultivate it.
Just rub some Rogaine on your face before you go to bed every night. Maybe that'll work.
Anyways, we've got Heather.
Hey, hello, Heather. It is nice to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, great. I have to be on my husband's computer in his office because my phone kept kicking off and I was missing stuff for the program. It's raining here. So when that happens, the technology suffers. My question or comment for discussion would be about mental illness and how it seems as though like it's almost like I'm not sure of the right term, almost like a fly trap. The different religions and stuff can be a fly trap for people who struggle with mental illness because it can give them something to hold on to that helps balance things out if they don't have other care and things like that. And then that like manifests itself in other ways. And I mean, it goes all across the board from narcissism to, this, God, I hope this doesn't mess up your channel. Severe mental retardation, it's like completely all across the board. And it's really interesting, how that kind of goes. But I just wanted to know your thoughts on that and your experiences, because you've all done quite a bit of traveling with your various ventures and stuff like that. And did you witness things like that, like similar setups, just in completely different areas, completely different cultures, completely different environments, except for the fact that it was a religious type setup? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so this is fun because this is like my job every day is dealing with mental illness and addiction. But yeah, the church has a lot of victims, and it also has a lot of how would you put it, hunters, if that makes sense, predatory
victimizers.
Yeah, victims and victimizers, and both of them are on, like, both of them in that status are usually involving some mental illness from both sides. And yeah, it's true what you say. A lot of mentally ill people feel compelled to go to church or learn theology or things like that, or get plugged into that. And I see that as a double-edged sword, because one of the treatments for addiction and mental illness is having a community support system. Usually those people go even farther off the rails if they're completely solo and isolated, right? You do need that feedback and that community support to help. But the problem is if your church is majority mental illness, then it's also going to perpetuate it as well. So the key is getting a few mentally ill people plugged into a lot of healthy people. And that's the ideal scenario. But the problem is like you said, I think more often than not, there's more mental illness in the church without giving that support back from the healthy people. A lot more times they just get ostracized, right? Or they start their own little clique and start doing their own crazy shit, so to speak. So, and that's just something I've noticed. I don't know if you guys noticed that as well, but I mean, where mental illness comes from, there's a short answer and a long answer. But I would say this problem is getting worse because I think in general, like globally, mental illness is getting worse. And then you got to start asking questions about why that is, right? It's going to take forever if you're just trying to spot clean or spot help every single church with every single mental illness. You kind of got to look at the bigger overarching picture, so to speak. But yeah, I would agree that the church draws mentally ill people in, and there's really no way around that. That's just going to happen, and I wish it was a good thing, but more often than not, it's usually not a good thing. It doesn't go well. So I think we're ill-equipped to deal with them, and also, like I said before, a lot of people don't know why mental health is declining so rapidly in at least the Western world, let alone probably globally.
Well, part of that was when they closed up the what were they called? The state hospitals back in like the 80s, I guess it was, when they were releasing people from facilities, and then they ended up being homeless people and stuff like that because they didn't have a place to go. But I don't know the exact dates or statistics on that, so I don't want to venture into that too far since I don't have an educable way of explaining that. But I just remember one of my grandmothers had worked at a hospital and everything for a period of time, and then she retired, and then soon after that things were down. And I know there was a lot of mental illness and drug use in a non-healthy way in the city where we used to live, and it's like I would see it walking out my front door and everything. So would you say that with the religion aspect of it, that it's more like a codependency feed going around, like, the people who are the more predatory feeding off of the people who are more needy, but the people who are more needy need that predatory person to guide them?
Yeah, there's a really good book that I think explains it really well called I think it's Ross Rosenberg is the author, and it's called Human Magnet Syndrome. So specifically when it comes to codependence, the victim predator mindset, what he says is like a healthy person is a 0. And if you're more of the predatory personality disorder side, then he calls you +1 to +5. And you're looking for equal -1 to -5 self-worth people, which, a lot of people call codependent, to feed off of, so to speak. Right. So like, a single coyote doesn't hunt a moose, right? He would get stomped to death. So a coyote is looking for, rabbits and chickens on its level. Likewise, big game predators like lions and tigers can hunt big game herbivores, so to speak, right? And so if you're extremely narcissistic, you're going to try to find the most codependent people you can. And a lot of codependent people really like that community support and trying to be plugged into things and always trying to help, right? And you'll find a lot of those in the church and in charity work. So it's a hunting ground, so to speak.
I've been both a predator and a
victim.
Yeah,
I don't want to say victim because
sorry.
I've been both predator and prey in that kind of environment with my volunteering and with church, growing up and various things. Now, you said it called the human magnet syndrome?
Yeah, human magnet syndrome. And he also talks a lot about where it comes from. Yeah, the mindset.
And the author again?
Ross Rosenberg. Yeah. And there's tons of stuff you could learn about that, but his, I think, is the most to the point, specifically what you're asking about, right? Because the word codependent, like you can ask 10 people and you'll get 12 answers of what that means. And I think his is a more wholesale understanding the general concepts of the approach, right? Of what they mean, because a lot of people will get nitpicking on what does it actually mean and all that. And actually, Sean Smith and I had an argument about that on Rich's channel once about what does codependent actually mean. But but yeah, and I was talking to him about this.
Or was that when you did that show where you were the guest?
Yeah, I wasn't a guest. I just called in for like a 20-minute stint talking about this stuff.
Okay.
I can't remember the episode. I have to go back and look at it. But
yeah,
I just really called in the middle, and Sean and I had a discussion about what does codependent mean.
Yeah, well, he's coming from a more therapeutic standpoint, where you're coming from a more how do you make it work in real life kind of.
Yeah, and part of his stuff is still kind of old-timey classical education instead of like reading the newest up and coming books, if that makes sense. It's kind of like that whole issue, like a lot of us here, we talk about ketosis and keto and carnivore diet and those kind of things. But a lot of doctors you ask today go, oh, that's absurd. But that's because they're, reading textbooks from the 80s, so they're not really, they're educated in what their books taught them at the time, not necessarily educated on the up and coming science of what's happening now kind of thing. So it's just kind of what it is. If you start your practice early, you get older material.
Well, my husband's a social worker, and he's now he's been a professor for a number of years, but he practiced privately for a very long time, and it's really cool when he can pull up something from way back when. That's an old theory and stuff like that, but yet he's also developed a new theory that's in a textbook now, and it's just very cool to see the old and the new mixed together. I prefer to see that because it's like you have the knowledge and wisdom from before, but then you can accept the new interesting stuff as well.
Yeah. Like I remember when the earth was flat, that was cool, right? Now, you know, it's the same kind of thing though. It's a universally popular opinion until it's not, right? Until you get new evidence that you have to create a new theory around. So just kind of the way it is.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Heather. I appreciate it. Did you guys have any? Yeah. Did you guys have anything to do with the mental illness comments? Anything like that?
I mean, I was just going to say that the big problem with the church is that they don't address the humanity side of the equation. And there is a real danger of all of those mental issues hiding behind religion, which is why a lot of these people flock there so easily, because the idea is to take yourself, eyes off yourself, focus on Jesus. So you never have to deal with those issues. I believe this is a very big reason why the divorce rates with the evangelicals and so forth is kind of on par with everything else, because they're looking at the completely wrong thing and ignoring the humanity of people. And if we took the humanity of people seriously and you need food, you need exercise, you need counseling, and all of these things, as well as your spiritual well-being, that is where a lot of these things could be addressed. But to admit that means, oh, well, Jesus isn't really enough and all this other kind of nonsense, right? So as I keep telling people, Jesus loved his body so much, he took it home with him. Your body is important, and the physical sustainability of the body requires all of these things. The church doesn't want to admit it, but it's a fact. So never be ashamed to do what's best for you, for your health, mental and physical.
Great.
Amos, anything you want to add?
Not really. No, I think he is.
Yeah, good.
I love how every time it goes to Amos, he's like, I don't know. It's like that's always his response when he's like thinking it through. It's cool.
Deep Thoughts with Amos. It's going to be a new podcast.
That's right. It's the next show.
Instead of with Jack Handy, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's an old reference that probably no one in the chat gets.
Oh, no.
Thanks for coming on, Heather.
Thanks for having me on. And are you guys going to be on next week? Is that next week, Easter Sunday?
Easter Sunday, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we're doing atonement.
So I get to go to church for Easter.
There you go.
There we go. All right, guys. Have a great week. Thank you so much.
You too,
Thanks, Heather.
You too, Heather.
Carl had a question in the chat about the opinion of the rise of religions like Pastafarianism and Jedi and the cult of Cthulhu. I actually think that's worth talking about.
But you still have to say about your worst religious experience that we were discussing before, and then we could discuss Cthulhu.
There's somebody to choose from. There's somebody. I would say to quick summarize story, the worst one was probably I got fired from a church because I called a hotline about a pedophile youth pastor that they didn't want to go to the cops.
Wait. The church was protecting the pedophile youth pastors, what you're saying?
Yeah, it was the pastor's cousin. So, and instead of having the police involved, they sent him to gay rehab in another state for a couple months. And then he came back and then just had a different position in the church. And the teen in question, talked to me, one-on-one because I came to visit. So this was like one of my internship programs. I'll try to make this as brief as possible, where you work like, fall to spring, almost like a school thing. And then you had summers off and then you'd come back in the fall kind of thing. And during the summer, I was going to some kind of like music festival kind of thing, but it would happen to be like 3 miles from that church. So I just came to stop by and say hi. And then one of the kids there came up and talked to me and said, "Hey, this happened like a month ago. we were doing this thing, and they had like rooms, hotel rooms for like an out of state conference they were doing. And he said the pastor touched him inappropriately while he was sleeping.
Wow.
And because they were all staying in the same room, and it was like in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep. And he told me about it, and I said, okay, well, what'd they do about it? And he said, I don't know. And I'm like, well, did you talk to the police or any authorities about it? He said, no, I didn't know I was supposed to, because this kid was 16 at the time. So, and so I was like, okay. So literally when I got, I already started calling the police and stuff because I wasn't working at the time. And it was still going on in the fall when I came back, the whole thing. And nobody talked about it. It was like a hush hush issue. And obviously he wasn't there at the time. He was in his gay rehab. So I asked the pastors, like my first week back, I said, hey, can we all go to lunch? The pastor and the associate pastor. And I said, okay, how did you guys handle this? Because I'm actually a mandated reporter because my family adopted and fostered kids before, which made you a mandated reporter. And they said, don't worry about it. We figured it out. And I was like, okay. Awesome. And literally the next day I called in sick and then went and made all the phone calls to hotline it. And I ended up telling one of my coworkers, he was new, but he was friends with me. He's actually from Mexico and barely spoke English. So we spoke Spanglish together, half English, half in Spanish. So like every other word, you know. And he said, yeah, he's like, those motherfuckers. Like he was more bad than I was. And I was like, okay. Right. So he covered for me and lied to the church saying, yeah, I saw him throwing up this morning. It was really bad. It's okay. You know, Corey's got to take the day off. And like, so I did that. And it took like 4 hours because the church and the conference and where that kid lives is 3 different states. So I had to keep calling all 3 and they kept putting me in that. And so not only did that happen, they found out a month later when the cops started calling the pastor asking for information, and then they fired me because I hotlined what they didn't.
Wow. Yeah,
pretty crazy. But yeah, it's a real panty dropper conversation. Yeah, I exposed a secret pedophile in the church. No big deal.
Dang.
And this, crazy story.
This is the thing. All of that is hidden. It's so easily hidden in under the veil of Christianity and other things. So yeah.
And actually a way a lot of churches hide stuff and ministry organizations is they don't like, they can like financially abuse people where they don't have to pay them a lot because they don't have to, since it's a Christian organization, they don't have to file that much paperwork with the government like normal employees do. So they can just say, oh, we're paying you $500 a month for you to work 80 hours a week, you know, fresh guy, fresh out of college that has no job experience. And a lot of people do it and don't realize that's wrong, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, the fact that it's a religious organization, they don't have to do as much paperwork with the government. They don't have as much stuff on file, so they can get away with a lot more. And I saw that happen like 3 or 4 times throughout my ministry career. And that's why I'm not in ministry, because it's bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story.
Yeah. So it's the opposite of fun. I don't know how else to put it.
Cool. What was your question about Cthulhu? What was that again?
That was Carl in the chat. I'm trying to see if I can go find it again. He was talking about why is there so many people, why, like, what's with the deal with the like pseudo religions that keep coming up, like the Church of Jedi, you know, that's a thing in Europe now, where people are putting Jedi as their national thing. There's also Pastafarianism, which is kind of like, you know, the parody of Christianity. Things like that. He's like, where do you think that comes from? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that's pop culture. A lot of that is, you know, it's not, I don't think it's like, even out here, we just had the census in the UK and the whole super straight thing came out around that time. Where, you know, if it is that you're biological, whatever you identify as your biological gender and sex, and you're only attracted to the opposite biological and, you know, sex, that you're super straight kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the census came out right at that time in the UK, and a whole bunch of people went and wrote down super straight as their gender identity, right? Why? Because they're pissing on it. This is where Kekistan. I don't know if you know the whole story with Kekistan.
Yeah, and Pepe and all that.
And Pepe and stuff. Carl Benjamin was one of the founding people out there, and he did it specifically for the census. So this year we're going to have a whole bunch of Kekistanis saying that they identify they're a minority group out here. They're Kekistanis. Same thing with Jedi. Jedi, it's I mean, there's not Jedi temple. There's no. I don't think there's a Pastafarian temple. I know there's a marijuana church in the UK. But there's no real Pastafarian thing. This is a leftover thing from the new atheist. So as social media is kind of picked up with all this kind of stuff, it just becomes cool to say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Kekistani, I'm a Jedi, I'm a whatever." But yeah, that's kind of my take on a lot of that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's trolling for trolling's sake. I think there is a message there. Like the super straight thing. Like there was kind of a message in it, right? Where they were trying to play by their rules, the people that were fucking with them, And I think you could see that similar. I think Pastafarian specifically, it does point at a lot of the issues the church actually does have. Like it's in bed with the government and trying to be an official religion and stuff. So they're trying to be an official religion to get the same benefits. You know what I mean? And it all comes down to those weird like government mixed with church and identity politics, right? It's just picking it. And my favorite like meaningful troll job of all time was Islam is right about women. To me, that was like perfect.
Yeah,
right?
That's a 4chan troll, definitely.
Yeah. And like, the meaning behind it is so specific because people are getting mad about something they say they agree with, right? And like it's just, poking the bear about like, the hardcore SJW feminism is all supporting Islam and demonizing Christianity. But Islam believes nothing they do, right? Correct. And so if Islam's right about women, you're either mad because you're misogynist now, or you're mad because you're pointing out that like Islam is misogynist, so to speak, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can't win.
Yeah, so it's a lose-lose if you're trying to have all these competing ideologies to be tolerant, except for Christianity, because they're evil white man stuff.
Which is crazy because Christianity is an Eastern religion. I just never understood that.
Oh yeah, it's funny that most people think Jesus was the only white guy in Israel. Speaking English. I have no idea what you guys are saying. I have no idea.
Well, what do you think, Amos? You still with Kekistan? Are you putting it down for the census, or are you a Jedi, Jedi Master, Sith?
No.
Yeah.
I think for the census, I did probably put something down for Taiwanese. I know the 2010 census, there was a big push to for Taiwanese Americans to write down Taiwanese. Trying to remember. Yeah, because there was it was basically a big push to kind of separate from Chinese.
So not just Asian, but like Taiwanese.
Yeah, because they would give you your options. Like there's drop downs or fill in. When you're filling in, excuse me, the paperwork, it kind of shows you like, okay, what kind of Asian? And it would only have Chinese. So there was a big push, change it to Asian other, and fill in Taiwanese.
Cool.
But yeah, that's it. So
what are your thoughts on the Pastafarians and the new atheist, and because they're not around anymore? I mean, the left basically destroyed the new atheist.
I don't know. It's a little too what's the word I'm trying to think here? A little too starchy, in my opinion.
The Pastafarian, very droll, Amos, very droll.
No, yeah, I think it's kind of the whole thing of just reactionary views nowadays. Like there's a lot of these like random offshoots that are just reactionary. Like Super Straight was a reaction to a lot of the trans stuff. Kekistan was a reaction to sort of PC culture. Pastafarianism is a reaction to fundamental religion as a whole. So when I look at it, it's when I hear someone say it, like granted, I did the whole Kekistan thing just as a meme, it's a joke. But now looking back at it, I've kind of felt like, okay, yeah, it's not really the most mature. So, like, when I talk to atheists, they're not throwing some Pastafarianism thing at me. And if they did, I'd be like, yeah, we're no, okay. Well, I know where you are then. Like, we're not going to have a conversation. Similarly, like, I have people on my Facebook, on my newsfeed, that are unironically identifying as super straight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, I think you missed the point there, bud. Like, all right, good for you. You are like everyone else, like most everyone else that you're going to know.
But Amos, the magic only works if you fully believe in
it. Yeah, I mean, they're putting on the full on, what is it? The orange and black color.
It's the Pornhub colors as their flag. Yeah.
And they've got the special sex logo thing with it's like two.
Anyways. It's the male and female, but like parted, like they're not like crooked. They're facing each other different ways.
And I kind of get it, but it's just there are people that are unironically identifying as that.
Sure.
And I'm like,
isn't that how every movement starts? It starts as a joke, and then someone takes it seriously.
Yeah, and that's the thing where it's like, this is what happens. Like there were, like I mean, Brooke, you and I have known some people that have taken the Kekistan thing very seriously.
Oh yeah.
And I'm kind of like, all right, and people got whole videos. There's a whole canon of work about the land of Kekistan. Remember all that?
It's a national anthem.
I'm just like, all right, guys. Yeah, all right. I'm just gonna put this hat away for now. a little crazy here. Yeah. So that's kind of where I am. Is like it's there is a more well-adjusted position to kind of like, yeah, you enjoy the meme. Like I see Super Straight, I'm thinking, cool, yeah, that's fun. See all the memes and it's funny and it's like, all right. And then kind of just don't latch on to it too quickly. But same thing, Pastafarianism. I see that and I go, all right.
Yeah.
Like Pastafarianism is just like it's old as a meme, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I see both sides of it because I see what you're saying. Because like eventually, the meme gets to the autists, so to speak.
The weaponized autism takes over.
Yeah. But I mean, there is still a point though that there should be some like if there is a message in it, like Islam is right about women, or even like Super Straight. I think there is a message in there, and the message comes through when you're saying it with conviction, if that makes sense, right? It's not just being a funny meme for a haha sake. They are trying to point at something, right? That there is some kind of weird, messed up thing happening right now in the identity politics sphere. Because I mean, Super Straight also started going into the question of like, do gay people are automatically misogynist then because they won't sleep with women, right? Or lesbians are instantly misandrist because they won't sleep with men, because straight people are automatically transphobic, right?
Yeah. So you have
does that mean gay people hate women, right?
No, so you have super gay and you have super lesbian as well, which is the same thing. They're only attracted to the biological opposite and not the trans equivalent.
Yeah.
So the supers are actually like all in the same thing.
Yeah.
But you guys this is actually ironic because y'all just passed legislation in the US where gender identity has now been added to the Equality Act. So it is now a protected class. So much like what we have in the UK, this actually has political ramifications. If we actually get it recognized as a legitimate gender identity, we become a minority and we get all the protections of the special classes that you can't talk about in the UK. So there's actually a political ploy behind some people taking that very seriously, at least in the UK. I don't know too much about how it'll affect you guys because y'all don't have a census coming up. But I'd be a little concerned seeing as what your government is doing.
I think it does more to draw to like the reactionary is purely that it's kind of like, oh, the pendulum is swung in this one direction and we don't like it. So we're going to basically swing the complete opposite way. And in some cases just as hard to kind of ironically just throw in this whole well, if you're if there's going to be 72 genders or whatever, then we're going to really push the two genders, or really just push one thing, one sexual identity, which is super straight or whatever, the super category. So it's like, you're over here, so we're going to come over here. And I'm kind of looking at it like, you're both funny. I don't know. You're both ridiculous.
No, the problem with that is that the far left has won. All of these gender
They're
identities.
putting those into laws. They're not.
Yeah,
just
all
saying
of these
stuff to saying
gender
stuff,
identities are exactly what CONK is saying. It's in your laws, right? Gender has been removed from the language of the Congress. This is now going to be imposed. The man in Canada has just been arrested for not calling his biological daughter a him, even though it's a girl. This is the creep that's actually coming down. So it's not as easy as just, oh yeah, it's a meme. No, this, because the left has the power, if you do not swing back, either, you're lost, right? There's nothing left.
Then there's no speed bumps for them to do whatever they want, right?
Correct. So it starts as a meme, but I mean, everybody thought the SJWs were crazy back in the late 2010 and onwards. Now these people have power. I mean, you got them in AOC, and her gang is in Congress, right? And they're pushing for radical, agendas and other things. So yeah, it might be all fun and games until these people actually get into power. And then you end up with, people going to jail for misgendering people, and, people locked up in Scotland for telling jokes that are offensive and other things.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because how I see everything, I don't really care that much about the left-right spectrum. I just care about how authoritarian you are right now. And right now, the left is much more authoritarian than the right, right? They want they want government change, like we were saying. They want more government intervention in everything, and all, obviously I'm hardcore on the anarchist side, but like all authoritarianism all ends in the same spot, whether you call it fascism or communism. It still ends with a lot of people dead and everyone miserable,
Pretty much.
So I don't really care if you call it left or right. Are you trying to make the government make me do stuff? Right. And in the 70s and 80s and all that stuff, the hippies were the non-authoritarians and the right was the authoritarians back then, right? And now it's the left is the authoritarians and the right is more of just leave us alone, So, I don't really pick the label of me being left or right, because left and right means nothing if there's no state, which is what I would prefer. So, yeah, everything's free to do what they want. There's really interesting, you guys have probably heard of him, but there's one of those political commentators similar to like Sargon and Tim Pool and all them, and his name's Short Fat Otaku. Have you heard of him?
No.
It sounds familiar. I might have watched a couple of his videos, but
I think his subscribers are only in the 5 or 6 digits. They're not as huge as Sargon and Temple of them, but he has videos with Sargon and all that stuff. But he had an interesting video about that the left-right paradigm, or the quadrilateral we used to have, doesn't really make sense anymore, because there's no such thing as left-wing anarchy. Does that make sense? And so what he does is he actually has a triangle now where the top point is liberty, and then it slowly goes and splits into left and right the more authoritarian you get. Because technically, if you have pure liberty, then you could do all the left-wing stuff you want, and that guy can do all the right-wing stuff you want, and it doesn't matter, because we still have that freedom as your base model of politics, right? So if you want to go start a communism thing in your own little town, cool, that doesn't affect me, right? But the problem is when you get authoritarian and start doing all the crazy federal shit, that's when you have to start paying attention, and that's when it starts splitting into left and right extreme fighting, right?
Correct.
And so I thought that was a really good breakdown, that just in general left and right doesn't work when you have to add in how much government control are you actually dealing with here.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
Where we got, guys? Any more questions in the chat? The guys in the chat are having a good time, man.
Yeah, they have their own show in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. We all hear the French. It's good.
Well, here's a future topic I want to do, but I could at least maybe start the conversation. How do you guys feel technology intertwines with religion? Roller talks about it a bit in his book, with the printing press and all that kind of stuff, and how technology can spur changes in the culture and in religion. I just want to hear you guys' 2 takes on how does technology influence religion, or religion influence technology?
depends on the technology, I would suppose.
Smartphones are the devil.
I'm halfway there.
Yeah, I'd need to think about that, because that's if it is, you're talking about like neural links and everybody can download a copy of the Bible like the Matrix, and you just get all the knowledge or whatever. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But it depends on the technology. If it is that they're going to track everybody and they know when you go to the bathroom, and which they basically do now with cell phones anyway, I'm no, I don't know if I'm as concerned for the religious side. I'm concerned for the authoritarian side, but yeah, we can make an interesting discussion out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what are the other topics? And it's kind of something we just talked about. Like, was Jesus a capitalist or a communist? Because you hear both sides of the church. There's both sides of the church proclaiming one or the other, right? So
I'd say he's neither.
Yeah.
He's what?
He wasn't really either one. I mean, the closest thing he would have been would be a mutualist.
Right, which was kind of not necessarily a capitalist, as long as it's voluntary, which is what capitalism is.
Well, mutualism is basically voluntary communism. No state involved. So it's anarcho-communism.
No, we call that charity. So it's basically capitalism.
Right, but I'm talking in proper terms, that's what it would be. It's like a voluntary commune type of thing.
Yeah, but that doesn't exist. That's just
I know it doesn't exist. Like,
I wouldn't say that he was that at all, because
people
he did
try to
take money.
ascribe Jesus to certain authoritarian views when you need to ascribe him to really non-authoritarian.
To voluntary.
Yeah, so exactly. Either it's voluntary, like, I mean, Jesus is closer to an ANCAP than he is to a any sort of right or left wing, like, modern day view. He's not really a communist or a fascist by any means, because those require authority.
Well, he did respect the authority of the Roman Empire.
No, he wasn't. Yeah, that in that way, because he wasn't really like. Well, I mean, with the political volatility of the day, he wasn't trying to start anything. He was just
correct.
When to really just preach. Anytime things would start to stir because of his presence, he would just leave.
Yeah. Anytime they wanted to lift him up as the Messiah and like kick the Romans out, he would just walk away. He didn't get involved in that. So he's not full anarchist in the sense like he had no respect for government and didn't think it had legitimacy, but he was definitely voluntarist. And again, people taking what happened in the book of Acts as some kind of commune, even that was voluntary. Nobody had to do it.
It was just one way of doing it.
And it was for the Jews alone. That was not
because the ministers of the time were still businessmen too.
Yeah, Jesus was supported by wealthy women, right? So he was definitely into charity.
He was supported by wealthy women.
Yeah. Most of his ministry was supported by wealthy women.
What was? I mean,
I have to pull up all the names and stuff. But
were they,
he was a charity. He was basically a charity. That's one rumor. Some of them are like widowers and stuff like that from like, other Sadducees and stuff.
I'm thinking of the, you really got to consider the times. Where would women get that much money?
Yeah, no, I mean they had wealth if they were part of the Sanhedrin and other things. They did inherit, and especially under Roman law, they did. So.
Yeah, they probably did the Mackenzie Bezos strategy.
Yeah, basically it was a bit of that going on. But
were
men
the
died
Romans feminists, so they by Roman law, like women would actually inherit their husband's wealth.
Yeah. They
especially
the
if they
Romans
had
were
no
pretty
kids,
progressive,
or the kids were doing something else.
Yeah. The Romans,
or even just the whole like,
progressive.
Jesus would be a feminist or something.
Not what most people would call feminist today.
No, true. It's just he'd be egalitarian, if anything.
What say you, CONK?
Yeah, well, this is why I brought this up, because you'll hear people say Jesus was a socialist, or Jesus was a communist, or Jesus was a capitalist, or Jesus was this or that. And you have all these churches yelling at each other, completely opposite positions, trying to say, well, if Jesus was here, he would do this. He would vote for this person. And I think that's an interesting topic, because so many people argue heavily on both sides,
There is a way of looking at it where it sounds like almost like the founding fathers would have said this or that or the other, because sometimes it's probably pretty close, but it's not quite. So people just be like, well, the founding fathers wanted this. Okay, but they don't see all these things that we're doing. Now that could be applied to a lot of things. Like some people want to say the founding fathers would have been for gun control because they didn't foresee machine guns. Or someone would say another way, the founding fathers actually would be for gun control because their view on the Second Amendment is absolute. Like both sides would be argued because someone would try to like pick apart some founding fathers' words or views. Like one who would maybe be a little bit more gun control leaning than others.
Yeah. I also think it's funny. This is a little small issue, but I also think it's funny that a lot of people put Abraham Lincoln as a founding father, but that was 90 years later.
Exactly.
Most people don't realize that. They're like, yeah, George Washington, Ben Franklin, Abraham Lincoln. Hold on. That was 90 years later.
There's an interesting view, too. There's a difference between founding fathers and framers of the Constitution.
Yes.
Because just because they signed the Declaration of Independence doesn't mean they were at the Constitutional Convention. So saying the founding fathers, it's just like, because really when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, well, there was Jesus, the founding father of the church, and then there was the disciples who actually went out and had the church.
Hold on. The Constitution, what'd you call it? Constitution Convention? Was there any like hot booth babes? There's usually a lot of those at conventions.
Well, yeah, we can definitely have that conversation. Awesome. Any more questions, guys? Any more questions? We have anything in the chat we need to kind of touch on because we're coming up on time?
You guys all write too much. I can't read that fast.
Carl, yeah, those are called paradoxes, where he can make a rock so big that he couldn't lift it. Those are nonsensical items that actually has no bearing on God.
Can Jesus make a burrito so hot that he himself cannot eat it?
Yeah, that kind of those are natural paradoxes. Those don't exist. So those are kind of nonsensical questions. I don't know if there are any others.
The Constitutional Convention was hot and stuffy with no air conditioning.
Yeah, Ben Franklin hadn't got shocked by lightning yet to invent electricity, So pretty sure that's how it goes, right?
Well, guys, I think that's it, man. I think if there are no other questions.
Yeah. All right.
That was a big one.
So, of course, thanks everyone for joining us. We do appreciate all the questions and the comments, and of course, helping us kind of continue the conversation. Kind of all over the place, but it's good. It's a little different change of pace. So, next week is next week Easter?
I think, yeah, next week is Easter. We're on CONK's channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll do our Easter special.
Our Easter special, yes.
Yeah. Do we want to get some bunny ears and baskets of eggs and stuff?
I don't know. Every time I hear the word special, I now think of the South Park version where they have to make a new weed for every holiday.
Oh,
they had like the pandemic special and the Christmas special.
The pandemic special.
So we're going to have our Easter special. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, download it. I'll have to take a look.
I've seen both of them. They're pretty good. So, yeah, I've seen that, but I haven't seen the Snyder cut yet. So,
oh dude, you
don't got to spare 4 hours.
Yeah, man, you got to find that time.
Dude, I watched it while I was working. It was great. I have the best job.
Did you guys see the new Lord of the Rings Jackson cut?
Oh, what does it goes for?
It's
8
like
days
4 days.
8 days, yeah. You get the full tour of New Zealand for that much time.
It's just a live camera of them filming it for months. It just
anyways,
that's funny.
So yeah, we'll be on next week on CONK's channel with our Easter special. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.